Hello everyone, Mike Stokes with Wildlife University, and today's video is about how to be wise. Better said, how to grow in wisdom. Because wisdom is not a place. It's not somewhere that you get to, it's something that you cultivate by degrees, that you get. Basically, there's no place called wisdom. There's only growing in wisdom or shrinking away from wisdom. So I'm just going to say them as they come to me, mainly because I forgot to bring in my little piece of paper that had all the notes that I took. The first thing that is critical to becoming more wise is to question your own assumptions. So the easiest way to think about your assumptions are usually your political views. So most of the people that watch this stuff are fairly progressive and liberal. So, questioning even the big giant views such as, is democracy the best form of government? What are the drawbacks of democracy? How could a less democratic society actually be beneficial? Wisdom, it doesn't ever really live in the extremes. It may sound cliche, but the Buddhist saying, the middle path it's a wise path. It's really, it speaks for itself in terms of its temperance. If you're on the middle path, then you're not on either of the extremes. That's not to say that sometimes it's right to take a stand that may seem extreme in somebody else's eyes. For example, let's say you take a stand for, it doesn't seem extreme to me, but let's say you take a stand that there can be no money in political campaigns, that they all have to be just publicly funded or entirely volunteer driven. So that may seem extreme to many people, but if democracy is going to work in the way it's supposed to work, if we assume that democracy is the best form of government, which it may have some drawbacks, which we're not going to talk about in this video, but so if you take a stand for something strong like that may seem extreme, when you're coming at something from a wise place, you're not just holding on to the idea in and of itself. If you look at politics today, there is this continual drive towards entrenched thinking, where you think in terms of a narrow bandwidth of ideas that are either expressed by the media outlets that you ingest, or expressed by the people that you choose to identify with. And those continue to drill into their own corner. So gaining in wisdom necessitates questioning your assumptions. If you don't question your assumptions, you'll never become a wiser person. And there's a common misconception, or I don't even know if it's a common misconception, but I've heard it in the past, is that someone who's older is wiser. And age and wisdom are not correlate. Age gives you the opportunity to have more experiences that can make you wiser, but it's how you relate to those experiences that does make you wiser. Someone who's 25 years old and has had a lot of experiences and has been constantly questioning their relationship to themselves and to the world around them, and questioning what is the nature of reality and how they fit in that nature of reality, is going to have a lot more wisdom than somebody who's 75 years old and just didn't pick, but was unconsciously downloaded a very narrow view of the world. For example, someone who's decided that they are the chosen people, so their particular religion or area of the world is the one people that the world revolves around. It's not a wise idea. It's contrary to all the evidence. So another way that you can become more wise is by deepening your relationship with reality. Now, what is reality? I hear it defined in a lot of different ways, but it's very simple what reality is. It's not that easy to see a lot of the times, but it's very simple. Reality is the natural world, period. Everything else is interpretation. The reality is the natural world, the physics behind it, the mathematics behind it, and the different layers of that physics and math and nature, and how each layer sort of interacts with the other layer and interacts with itself. So people like to quote quantum physics and quantum mechanics as meaning that there's no more rules. Everything's a possibility, and that's not an empowered relationship with reality. And reality, if I knock on this wood, that wood's not going anywhere unless I take a hammer or a saw to it. This reality is real, as is the quantum level reality that tells me that there's more space than solidity in this wood. But I still have to deal with the reality that's in front of me. So where people go awry in their approach to becoming more wise, becoming more related to reality, is they interpret what they see as what's in front of them. So let's see if I can think of a good example. Nothing's coming to the mind right now, but if I were to say, all the world, there's this common idea in Eastern thought or New Age thought that everything in this world is an illusion, and the real world is beyond life. That may give you some freedom from your own neuroses, but it's not going to really give you an empowered relationship with reality. To have an empowered relationship with reality, you have to go inside your physical body and deepen your relationship to the world that you live in, not into some imagined world of spirit that is beyond you. So, for example, in Buddhist practices, in Vipassana meditation, you go deeply into your sense of sensation and refine your ability to notice how your body experiences itself and experiences the world around you. And then by refining and becoming less reactive to those sensations, you become more and more able to discover and feel these subtle sensations and reactions that you have that when you're not paying attention don't occur. So what that enables you to do is to use the reality of your body, yourself, the physical nature of you, to have a wiser relationship to the outside world. It's such a big topic, and I don't have my notes in front of me, so I don't want to waste your time, but I don't want to miss anything either. So another idea is, just to break it down into a really distilled idea, is to notice the way that you react. So you react, I react, we all react. If you're alive, you react. You react to your environment. You react to the people in your environment, the smells in your environment, the sights in your environment, your home, your bank account, your physical sensations, pain, like, oh, my back hurts, or pleasure, like, oh, that was great sex. So you respond to all of those kind of things. You react. Mainly we start by reacting. And so in order to gain in wisdom, you got to put a pause in between an experience and then how you interpret it and what you do. So let's say you eat a piece of cake and you thoroughly enjoy that cake. You don't want to take away that joy, but rather than just being mindlessly, gobbling up the cake and wanting more of that fulfilled sensation that you get, if you pay attention to eating the cake and that what's happening in your body, then you'll see that you're having these reactions all the time, and cravings, and oh, I want more, and that's what happens in a body when we become addictive. Is we become very unconscious to that cycle of taking something in and then feeling the pleasurable sensation and then immediately grabbing for it again. And the grabbing part is in your brain is telling you, I need this, and you actually get the shot of serotonin, dopamine, all the happy chemicals in your brain just from craving it. So you get addicted to the craving. So in order to gain in wisdom, you really have to take on some sort of mindfulness practice, some sort of meditation, and you have to take on something that enables you to notice your own reactiveness. When I used to teach yoga, like in classes where people were doing postures and stuff, I used to I forgot where I was going with that analogy. I used to hear people talk a lot about, oh yeah, I meditate every day, and it's really awesome, and then I ask them, well, what do you do? What kind of meditation is it? And they say, well, I just sit there and I visualize a place on the beach, and then I just let my mind wander into this happy place on the beach, and those are all fine. Those are fine for anxiety reduction if you have a state of anxiety that is not healthy, that is extended. Short bursts of cortisol and anxiousness are actually healthy for the body, but if you have a chronic sustained anxiety, then those kind of things are helpful as a beginning point. But you're never going to gain in wisdom until you start to train your mind to focus so that you can see where it goes. Because your mind's going to go all kinds of places. And that's the most common thing that I hear when people talk about meditation and they say they can't do it. It's like, oh, my mind wanders all the time. I can't focus like that. And that's actually the sign that your meditation is working, when you've begun to observe how much your mind wanders. And the wandering mind is the opposite of the wise mind. The wandering mind can be very creative. It can create, world-class pieces of art, but it's not going to help you gain in wisdom. The world-class piece of art is this place sort of between shamanism and psychosis and creative dream mythologies, and somehow, the world-class artist cracks out of themselves into that in-between space and then make something there. Now, when they make that doesn't make them more of a wise person when they come back. It gives them a transcendent experience. But in order to gain in wisdom, I guess I need to say this, wisdom's kind of boring. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, it's not, it's not going to make the headlines. It's a slow process that gradually makes you happier and healthier and stronger and all those things that we say we want, but it's not exciting. I mean, you can make it exciting, and maybe I'm going to work on that. I think I'm going to work on that. I have been working on that. I'm not really very good at making wisdom exciting yet, but there's no reason that it shouldn't be a joyful, exciting process. That's just not naturally how it is. When you're down in your lower energy centers of your root and your sexual centers and your energy, like your ego drive, those are all really exciting. That's why we go to movies and we see heroes and people have sex without their wives, or they do things that we don't think we don't accept, but they still make us excited when we watch it on the screen. Wisdom comes from growing in mindfulness. And you grow in mindfulness in several different ways. One way to grow in mindfulness is to question your worldviews. So when you question, what do I think God is? And how do I relate to God? And do I need to relate to God? Is God separate than me, or am I God expressing itself? Is the world created by something or someone, or is the world creation God? So when you ask yourselves these big questions, you have to grow in wisdom. It's when you sort of insulate yourself from the big questions and you adopt a particular way of looking at the world that your wisdom literally starts to shrink. It's the great quote by, I think it's Bob Dylan, I hope I got it right. You're either busy being born or you're busy dying. There's no in between. There's no stagnant place. You're either gaining in wisdom or you're retracting away from it. And we're all going to do both. Life is cyclical. It's an upward spiral. Oh. I'm turning down the sauna. Life is cyclical. It's an upward spiral, or it's a downward spiral. But so here's an example of a wise way to relate to time and nature, and being on Earth. So Earth, we all know now, so when people were less wise, I don't want to say they weren't wise, but they were less wise, they used to think that the Earth was flat. And then when they were less wise, they also used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. And this is the same thing with these archaic religion and these archaic ideas. People hold on to them because they make them feel safe, but they don't help you gain in wisdom. They just help you feel safe. And wisdom, being on the path of wisdom is for someone who's willing to disrupt their life a little bit. If you can't disrupt your life, if it's too stress-inducing for you, or too chaotic for you, or too unnerving for you, then you're not ready to gain in wisdom, and your wisdom will be perverse. You see people out there, charlatans all the time out there, that are professing to have this great wisdom, and then you see on the back end that they do all these awful things. They kick dogs, and they molest people, and they do all kinds of horrible things because the wisdom was a facade. So the deep wisdom comes when you're able to question your entire worldviews, including religion and politics and the sense of ego and self. So, So basically, in order to grow in wisdom, you need to question yourself, question your assumptions, question your worldviews, question your ideologies, question your economic and political views. You need to start expanding those types of information that you're exposing yourself to, and not limiting yourself to one field. You also have to have a very solid ground of support. You can't grow in wisdom if you are barely emotionally surviving. So gaining in wisdom requires a high degree of emotional stability. The emotional, the EQ, as the author would say. So back to this idea of how you can relate to growth in a more grounded, reality-based way, more nature-based way that's aligned with reality. So, for example, like I said before, less wise people thought that the earth was flat. Less wise people thought that the earth was the center of the universe. I need to say one thing, a caveat about that. So knowledge doesn't equal wisdom. So there were a lot of people back then that, not a lot, there was a minority of people back then that you could say were very wise. And they were the ones that were asking the questions. They were the Copernicuses and the Galileos. They were questioning the nature of reality. Now, that's not to say that if you're a scientist or if you're just a total logic, fact-based person that you're going to gain in wisdom. Because you can take the scientific method, the societal accepted mode of operation, and you can make that rigid. And you can make it not a wise way, and you can pull away from reality. History is rife with examples of people who are trying to apply the scientific method and just their ego's stuck on this one idea, and they can't let it go, and they fight and fight and fight, and usually there's a whole mainstream fight that happens in the scientific community, and then the person that has the information that's backed up by the evidence, after they've been dragged through the mud and their careers have been ruined, then they come out on top. Sometimes it's less traumatic than that, but a lot of times that's what happens when you're moving on the path of wisdom and knowledge. So knowledge and wisdom aren't correlate. I mean, they're correlate, but they're not causal. So just because you have more knowledge doesn't mean that you have more wisdom. So, for example, I'm going to talk about how you gain wisdom, or how you really gain growth in your life. So, for example, if you think about the Earth now that we know, it spins around the sun, and then the sun is on the outer edge of the galaxy, and the galaxy is on the outer edge of the universe, and the universe is expanding, I believe, at a faster rate, and then time is correlate to space. So the farther away from something you are, if you are to travel to that space, the less time you experience. And then when you're set in one place on that expanding universe, on that plane, then time is, it occurs as a point for you. But so everything is related to that point at which you're in, and then how you're relating to the rest of the world. So relativity is a wonderful idea to contemplate, because it makes you let go of your fixed positions, your literal fixed position in the universe, because you have no fixed position in the universe. It's literally spinning all the time. So one way to visualize that, and I wish I could get a graphic, I may not be able to, I may not, you just might have to imagine it, is you have the Earth going around the sun, and then the solar system going around the galaxy, and the galaxy, I'm not sure if it's spinning around the universe or just, I think it's just expanding, but I don't know that depth. But all those forces are happening, and the Earth itself is spinning every, 24 hours. And so you're literally standing on a spinning spot that's cascading through space in a spiral form. And it's spiraling like the spin of the Earth, and then it's spiraling wider like the spin of the solar system, and then it's spiraling wider like the spin of the galaxy. So here you have these three spirals, and you're never in the same place twice. You're always moving from one place to the next, and your relationship to time and space is constantly changing and constantly evolving. So if you adopt this linear thinking that says, I am this fixed being in this fixed place, you're completely disassociated from reality, because reality has no such thing as a fixed place and a fixed time. It's all relative to every moving object around you. So how can you use that to your advantage? Well, if you're thinking about things in your life, and rather than saying, this book told me this is the nature of reality, or this person told me this is the nature of reality, you look at those ideas which are well established and verified and tested, and notice how can you relate to your physical body and to your mind in a way that honors these cyclical patterns that are happening as we speak. Right now, you've gone through partial revolution of the planet. You've gone through a partial revolution of the solar system, a partial revolution of the galaxy, and it's moving outward. So imagine these spiral lines. You're not just, sometimes the way I used to imagine it is it was just a spiral and it was just a circle, like an orbit, how they'd show you on those videos you'd see. But it's not. It's a spiral going through space with 3 different spirals. So it's much more complex than we let ourselves believe. And that's one of the reasons that many people associate with the 3,000-year-old religions, because the 3,000-year-old religions, there's this common misconception that they're not aligned with science, and that's just not true. 3,000-year-old religions were 100% consistent with the science of their era. And it's silly that we try to map 3,000-year-old science and stories onto today's science and stories. We need new stories. We need a new book. And then 3,000 years we can debate as to whether that book is still relevant. But we need a new way of looking at ourselves in the big, mythic, psychic, spiritual sense of the term, so that we feel meaning and comfort and really those two, meaning and comfort and aliveness. So you feel those things inside your life. So example right now, I just stopped. So my thought train naturally stopped. So I let it stop rather than fighting that and trying to fill the space with something that isn't authentic, that will gratify my ego. I just stopped and noticed. And what I noticed is I noticed my body. And, my heart rate is elevated. I'm in a sauna that's roughly 130 degrees. And I feel a little bit of anxiety in my body. You can see the hands are a little bit shaking. That's really close. Just look farther away, it doesn't look so bad, but there's definitely some anxiety in my body from trying to present something that I believe is important, and feeling a little nervous about that. Feeling a little nervous about the quality of my videos. I wish I had more time to make them better, to add more powerful editing and content. So that nervousness is real. And it's inside of me. And it is part of reality right now. Now here's where we go awry. If I start telling myself that nervousness means that I'm not a good presenter, or I'm screwing up, or it's just not, I'm just not supposed to be nervous, or if I in any way negate or try to make go away the experience that I'm having in this moment right now, then I start to move away from wisdom and start to move into this world where I'm going to manufacture an idea of what reality is in order to fit my comfort. I think that's probably one of the biggest principles. We move away from wisdom when we're focused on comfort. Comfort and wisdom, they're not mutually exclusive, but they're not kissing cousins. If you focus on comfort most of the time, you're going to go down in wisdom. If you're focused on just pushing past your boundaries all the time, you're going to go down in wisdom too, but in a more painful way. So again, that middle path of noticing, am I really focused on comfort right now? And letting that go, and then letting a little bit of mindful discomfort in. You can watch the Mindful Challenging Your Comfort Zone video if this topic interests you more. So more than anything else right now, I believe that the world needs two things. It needs a movement that values wisdom above all else. I can't say above all else. That values wisdom as equally as it values life itself. And when I say life, I don't mean newborn babies. I mean everything. Trees, plants, mosquitoes, larvae. Now that doesn't mean that, everyone has to become a vegan and that you're never going to do any harm to any being in the world ever. That's the Jain religion. That's a dogmatic extreme religion too. But what it does mean is that we live in a time, we live in a place where life screams for being honored in and of itself, not for its economic value. Not at all for its economic value. Those are fine, but those are band-aids. Not going to help the planet. We're in a spiritual crisis. And that spiritual crisis is a separation from man, woman, and nature. We are nature, and many of our great ways of thinking about the world have completely forgotten that and completely disassociated from that. And actually, 3,000 years ago, had a vested self-interest in disassociating people from nature, because the religions of 3,000 years ago were very nature-based. And in order to distinguish themselves from competing religions who had a ton of power, they had to excise nature, exorcise or excommunicate nature. So that is the core dilemma that we face right now. Come up with ways that are compelling to get people. If you're already on board, then try to get people to reframe their relationship with nature and with their righteousness, the ways that they view the world as permanently fixed, and challenge them to question more. Challenge them to be more agnostic in the biggest sense of the word. Not just in the, I believe God is X or Y, but in, I'm willing to question my assumptions. I'm willing to look at the evidence before my ideals. And then challenge yourself to notice where you're attached. So this is another big, super important idea when you're practicing gaining wisdom. There was a wonderful episode of Freakonomics many years ago, 5-6 years ago, where they talked about experts and how experts, and they did a statistical analysis of experts and found that experts, when they discovered something, were, they're right. But then, when they went on to publish second and third and fourth works, their accuracy plummeted. And it's obvious why their accuracy plummeted, because once they had the following, once they had the money, once they had the status, once they had the power, their ability to see objectively declines automatically. So it's a double-edged sword. The more you become an expert, the more accolades you get, the more recognition you get, the more of anything that's beneficial to you personally that you get, the more difficult it's going to be for you to see the truth. And that's true for everyone. And it's true for me, and it's true for you. So let's close on that note. I think that's a good note to close on. I wish you the best of luck of gaining wisdom in your life and spreading it around. God knows our world needs it. And I don't mean the liberal progressive causes, of which I'm a fan of most of them, but I mean figuring out how to find where you and where I and where the people that are on our side aren't seeing the whole picture. You can't, in a world of nearly 7 billion people, you can't hold a narrow view and have a functioning world anymore. Those days are over. And that's the turmoil that we're in right now. Forget politics, forget economics, forget technology, forget all that shit. That's all irrelevant. The most important thing is that we have to, a majority of us, or the most influential of us, have to start perpetuating this cultural idea of letting go of our ego, of putting truth and evidence above ego. And it's so, and I'm talking specifically to the progressives and the scientists and the liberals right now, it's very easy for you to beat your drum and say, I'm on the side of science. But you're not always. And, you know, I'm as big of a progressive as anybody else, but you have to start questioning yourself. The more you're going into something with a rigid viewpoint, you're deluding yourself and you're compromising the cause. Because the more you come in with a righteous position, it's an equal opposite. The other side does the same thing. That's the Donald Trump effect. That's what it is. Nothing else. It's just he comes from this narrow band and says, this is the way it is. And then everybody else goes, no, this is the way it is. And so you have to break that cycle. He's not going to break that cycle. And it may look like you're yielding, but don't misinterpret intelligence, complexity, and giving where giving is appropriate as a sign of weakness. It is not. Just ask Gandhi, you know. He was a master at that. So yield where yielding is appropriate. Stop holding lines that don't need to be held to. Find where you can yield and find where you can hold on to. This is the essence of a healthy relationship. There are certain things that are non-negotiable. But it ain't everything. That's where we make the mistake. We think like, I have to hold on to all these things or I'm going to disappear. You don't. I mean, you have to grow in your own self-confidence and your own self-worth, but it doesn't take too much. I mean, I can't say that. It's a challenging road to hoe, but grow in your self-worth, grow in your self-confidence, and you'll find, if you're willing, that you'll be able to yield more to others. And when you yield more to others in the right way, in the way that says, I don't need the living room to be blue. I just need us to use cloth napkins and biodegradable detergent. You can have a blue living room. Those are secondary to my core values. So figure out what your core values are, hold those lines, and then start to question. And even, question some of those core values. Are these really mine? Did I inherit this from my town, from my dad, from my mom, from my teacher? Do I really believe these with all my heart? Are they the unassailable truth? Are they as much of the truth as the universe? And if they're not, then see which part of them you feel is important to hold on to and let go of the rest and then hold on to those parts. And then that's the healthy relationship that the world needs you to create in the microcosm, and then we can create it in the macrocosm. There is no distinction between external politics and internal psychics. Psychological phenomenon are one in the same in external politics. Just look at the president. It's his psychological makeup that creates the disasters that he creates. So work on your psychological makeup and then take it out into the world and be an enlightened activist. Be an enlightened ecopreneur. Be an enlightened socialpreneur. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your time and attention. Subscribe if you got value out of the video. Share with a friend.